Welcome to part 5 of my story. So my husband comes down from the NICU, looks at me, says the baby's vocal cords won't open. How's that possible? My entire life I'd been told I had an intubation injury, that I had vocal cord paralysis due to an intubation injury. You can't pass on an injury. It's like you, person watching me, saying, well, I broke my arm as a child, so I'm afraid I'm going to give birth to a child with a broken arm. No, I wasn't looking for a genetic problem because the other members of my family didn't have it. Well, now I know I'm not genetically related to all the other members of my family. So my daughter was in the NICU. They wouldn't let me in. It was hours. It was hours before they would let me see her. They finally wheeled me over to her bedside. I looked at her. She was intubated, sedated, and had tubes coming out of absolutely every part of her. And I remember I reached over and I touched her leg. And a nurse came flying over from the other side of the NICU, and she's like, Mrs. Worath, would appreciate it if you didn't do that. I don't blame the hospital staff. What we have is so rare, they had never seen it at the hospital where my daughter was born. My daughter, both of her vocal cords were completely paralyzed. When she went to take a breath, instead of opening like they were supposed to, she was being suffocated. They were sucking in. They had to take an intubation tube, their smallest tube, and wedge it in between her vocal cords. That tube was keeping my daughter alive. They were afraid if I touched her, if I moved her, that tube would become dislodged. I don't blame the hospital. They were terrified. They were terrified. They had never seen anything like this. My daughter was on a ventilator for 2 weeks. In the 2 weeks that she was on that ventilator, I kept telling them that I had the same thing. I didn't know why, and I didn't know how. But I'm like, this cannot be an accident, that we both have vocal cord paralysis, that we both required intubation. I don't know what happened, but this can't be an accident. So twice in the 2 weeks that she was on a ventilator, they tried to what's called extubate her. They tried to get her off a ventilator. So essentially they would just pull out the ventilator tube and her vocal cords would just go right back together. And we were right back where we started. After the second time, I had to literally yell. I had to yell at a room full of NICU doctors. I'm like, what are you waiting for? They said, Mrs. Worath, we're waiting for her vocal cords to open. I said, well, I've been waiting for 34 years and mine don't open. They won't open. I said, I don't know what happened here, but my vocal cords still don't open. I said, she needs a trach. The reason for the trach is as a baby and a young child, my vocal cords were completely blocking my airway. I couldn't breathe from my nose and mouth. I'd breathe from here. It was a bypass. I said, she needs a trach. They said, Mrs. Worath, we've never had a mother ask for a trach. I said, you have never had a mother who's had one. I said, is she going home like this? They're like, no. I said, so what are your options? You can't leave her on a ventilator indefinitely. That's not an option. They agreed with me. And they put the trach in. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, to ask for a trach for my child. But I knew there was no other option for her. They put the trach in. My daughter was fine. What we have doesn't come with anything else, just vocal cord paralysis. They kept my daughter 2 additional weeks after the trach went in. And in that 2-week time period, my husband and I had to prove to the hospital staff that we could care for her, that we could do all of her trach care, that we could suction the trach, clean it, change it, do all of her care. And the weird thing was, I had a trach till I was 4.5. I remembered. The equipment was the same, just made out of different things. My trach was metal, hers was silicone. They function the same way. My suction machine was glass with a rubber hose. Hers was plastic. They worked the same way. So it wasn't so unfamiliar to me. We proved to the hospital staff that we could safely care for her, and they allowed us to bring her home. Now, they never ran genetic tests in the hospital. That wasn't their job. Their job in the NICU was to get my daughter stable so that we could bring her home. They did that. They did an excellent job. I have no issue with the hospital whatsoever. Once we got my daughter home, we went for genetic testing on our own. Please join me for part 6 to hear more of my story.